an unholy copy of life, a mockery of its freedom, and born in the cruel betrayal of the noble ideals I would have served.
Surrounded in rage, a once mighty celestial god, now long forgotten, wields his blade against all that would breathe, all that would exist, for as long as time continues. Aatrox will quest for absolute oblivion. A once noble quest, turned by the passage of time into a conquest of savagery and brutality. Aatrox is a tragic remnant of Shurima's elite vanguard against the Void, and is among the Forsaken Warriors known now as the Darkin. Aatrox, the avatar of a now forgotten celestial ideal, is cursed and bound, an unholy birth of a creature so cruel, so full of hatred, that they would mock the very nature of their original purpose. Yet, for all this intensity, for all that lies on the surface, Aatrox hides behind his rage a desire for purpose so deep-seated that he embodies the idea of ferocity and rage within the mortal realm. How does one go from a god to a prisoner? Through the actions of the aspects and the intervention of Targonians, Aatrox was not created, but forgotten.
I have no goodness left. It was taken from me, stolen. I am the nemesis of life.
During the golden age of Shurima, there were those that were chosen to be ascended. The Sunborn, ascended god warriors of their time. Through the knowledge stolen from Aurelian's soul during his binding, the information to build the Sun Disk was discovered. This golden disk would allow those within Shurima to channel the sun's power in order to ascend one of their own. This was a process that was done throughout Shurima's golden age and continued on to be the key defining interaction for some of their most prominent characters. Aatrox, Azir, Narsus, and Renekton were all ascended as god warriors of Shurima. Aatrox was the celestial god of a now forgotten celestial concept. Aatrox's original ascended form is described within the Darkin Blade as, in ancient times, long before desert sands swallowed the Empire, a mighty champion of Shurima was brought before the Sun Disk, to become the avatar for a now forgotten celestial ideal. Remade as one of the Ascended, his wings were the golden light of dawn, and his armor sparkled like a constellation of hope from beyond the Great Veil. These were the god warriors of Shurima, and not only were they respected by the forces of Shurima, but they were feared by their enemies. The power of godlike abilities given only to those chosen for its prestige is certainly a power to wield. Aatrox was well known throughout this time to be revered as one of the greatest, an inspiration to other god warriors, and a fearless being of loyalty towards Shurima and its emperor. The ascended god warrior Queen Setica called for his aid against the rebellion of Icathia, and Aatrox was joining the 5 armies marching towards Icathia without hesitation. Dedicated, powerful, and noble, Aatrox stood as the avatar of a celestial concept, an idea so unique to the Celestials that mortals within Runeterra would cease to have the ability to conceptualize its origin or purpose.
I stood against the void. Now I would welcome it.
Icathia, a neighboring region to Shurima and Ishtal, was originally a mage society ruled by mage kings who fell to Shuriman rule after an invasion into the kingdom of Icathia. As a result, the people of Icathia were subjugated and enslaved, while their previous home was turned into a vassal state for Shurima. For centuries, the people were forced to stare at the broken walls of Icathia's defenses as a reminder of their defeat. Bitterness and resentment for their conquerors rose through time, and a group known as the Kahari were created to retake the city of Icathia. A brutal hatred poured into the streets of Icathia. Red mist would rise from the executions of all Shuriman servants. Whether they were a warrior of Shurima or a merchant did not matter. The Kahari descended into savagery and aimed to execute any trace of Shurima from their city. For a moment, there was hope. Despite the brutality of the situation, Icathia had been retaken, but it would not fall again. 10,000 women and men were conscripted to defend and uphold Icathia's original ownership. Brave warriors rose in ranks to stand against Shurima's forces within the Kahari, such as Jax, the Grand Master at Arms. Bear in mind that at the time, Jax's name was actually Syjax Kaelrinx Icathun, and he shortened it to just Jax much later on. Azir sent 5 armies, each consisting of tens of thousands of men, golden chariots carrying forward the means of destruction. Heavy wagons held their contents, war machines akin to that of Shurima, strange in their design but inherently dangerous nonetheless. Astrolabes, spinning globes orbited by flaming spheres, bursting with crackling lightning. At the heart of these armies stood the God Warriors, 9 ascended, led by their leader Setika. Among these 9 were Narsus and Aatrox, armored in bronze and jade. They marched, and upon arrival to Icathia, the battle proceeded with brutal intensity. Shurima may have overrun the Icathian forces had it not been for the combined power of their mages. These, however, were the same mages that would free Icathia only to doom it, for they had attempted to channel something far more dangerous into this war. They intended to weaponize the Void. Needless to say, this is a terrible idea. Upon releasing the power of the Void, Icathia's pavilion exploded with forking traces of light. Arcing loops of purple energy ripped into the sky and lashed down like crashing waves. The force of the blast sent everyone to the ground, and the sky turned from blue to the color of a week-old bruise. An abyss that bled purple light tore open amid the Shurimans as men and women were swept up and enveloped. Bodies dissolved as the tendrils of foul energy overwhelmed them. Icathia had unleashed something outside of its control upon Runeterra. The mages had incited the release of the Void itself. A war created at the hands of self-destructive Icathian mages to be fought against the manifestations of the Void by ascended god warriors of Shurima, the Sunborn. Setika, leader of the Sunborn, was consumed during the opening of the rift, ripped into almost nothingness by the maw of the Void itself. Many Sunborns still remained, and amongst these stood Aatrox. The Void War was for the most part a traumatic experience. Countless battles were fought against monstrosities that descriptions would fail to depict. They can be described by their size or their destruction, but the core design of creatures of the Void means that each one of them is inherently unique. There were battles fought on land, across the shores, and deep within the crashing tides of the ocean. Void rifts polluted the land. The armies of Shurima fell in thousands as their mortal soldiers were slaughtered in battle by enemies matched only by the power of godlike ascension. Even so, the Sunborn battled past this and carved seas of red across the desert in their defense of Shurima. One ascended by the name of Horok possessed a weapon known as the Rift Blade, an artifact that would one day be rediscovered by Kassadin. The blade possessed the ability to seal void rifts deep in the underground tunnels, and was quintessential to the Sunborn's war against the Void. Shabaka and Shabaki, ascended twins with the heads of ravens, would eventually help seal the Great Rift at Icathia, ultimately halting the spread of the Void.
We had another name once. Now we are Darkin.
As the Void War expanded from Icathia, an act of betrayal struck at the heart of Shurima. In the moment of Azir's greatest step into power, Xerath interrupted and attempted to steal Ascension from Azir through the means of murder, throwing Azir outside of the ritual circle to be consumed with the flames of the sun itself. Xerath continued to enter the ritual circle as an attempt to ascend. The ritual of ascension was not prepared for Xerath, and as a consequence, the destruction of the sun disk itself occurred, and all of its power was forced into Xerath. All this power made it impossible to try and fight Xerath, and as such, Renekton ended up sacrificing himself in order to hold Xerath within the Tomb of the Emperors, allowing Narsus to seal Xerath away. There was still, however, a problem within the heart of Shurima. Without the life-giving waters of the sun disk, the population of Shurima began to wither. After returning to Shurima only to discover it had fallen long before their arrival, the Sunborn were enraged. Without their emperor and without a means of survival, the age of Shurima had fallen. The Sunborn had nothing. Traumatized by the years of war against the Void, returning home battered and broken, having lost all mortal troops to the hand of Icathia's mistake, only to discover their kingdom fallen, and their emperor dead. Without any monarch to defend, or the existential threat of the Void to test them, Aatrox and the Sunborn began to clash with one another, and eventually this became a war for the ruins of their world. Mortals fleeing the conflict came to know them instead by a new and scornful name, the Darkin, based on an old Shuriman word which most closely translated to the Fallen. Many remember the Darkin for their reign of colossal infighting, but few recall their sacrifice, the act of morality that ignited the start of the end of all Darkin. Years passed. Sunborn fought mercilessly against each other, while Narsus walked in exile, shattered by the loss of his brother and the fall of Shurima. Within the lost mind of Ta'anari, another of the Darkin, was found a mortal trait unexpected to return. Ta'anari found their conscience. Through meeting Misha, the aspect of Twilight, Ta'anari was now more aware of the ongoing atrocities and sought to end the Darkin War. Misha led them to discover Narsus. He explained the struggle of the Sunborn and asked for the help from Narsus. Ta'anari was seeking the Chalakar, the weapon of the Ascended's leader, Setika. Narsus buried the few remains of Setika and her weapon after the initial rift opening, and after hearing Ta'anari out, Narsus revealed the location of where to find this legendary artifact of power. Taking training in the art of performing a ritual to reverse the ascension of the Darkin from Misha, a gathering of all Darkin was called upon to attempt to summon them for one last time. While many did appear, there were those who did not. Within the land where the marketplace of Nerimazeth once stood, the Darkin met. Describing the atrocities and endless struggle being enacted by their kind, Ta'anari was forced to kill one of the Darkin before continuing his final speech. They hate us, and when the horrors of the abyss rise once more, they will beg for our return, but we will be gone, no more than whispers on the song winds, a dark legend of imperfect gods told to scold disobedient children. Ta'anari then struck the Chalakar into the ground, and a blazing column of white fire stabbed from the midnight sky to strike the arena. There were Darkin who tried to flee, Darkin who simply accepted their fate, and then there was Ta'anari, who awoke to find themselves now immortal once more. Misha, however, was not one for kindness. Using the Chalakar, she cut open the now mortal Tryndamere, almost with joy, and proceeded to explain that Runeterra will never see peace, as she reached into his chest and removed his heart. As Tryndamere's mortality faded, Misha comforts them with the knowledge that with the ritual completed, the mortals will now have a means to capture the remaining Darkin. This is how Misha taught mortals how to trap the Darkin, not through a magical scroll from celestial lands, but by having all the remaining Darkin who held onto their conscience executed by one of their own in order to extract their essence for the usage of magic. The reason we may not have had another Darkin champion revealed for a long time now may be because the only Darkin champions will be those that refuse to show up to the ritual and were then hunted post-Ascension reversal to be sealed away within their weapons.
How far I have fallen! A god reduced to a prisoner!
Now that the mortals had discovered how to trap the Darkin, they intended to use this power. Pantheon, the reborn aspect of war, was able to lure Aatrox into a fight. Aatrox and his armies arrived in full force only to realize the deception of the battle. Before Aatrox could realize, a force greater than 1,000 dead suns pulled him inside the sword he had carried into battle countless times, and forever bound his immortal essence to it as the aspect of war severed Aatrox's sword arm in one strike. This was the price paid by Aatrox's brethren. The cost of this knowledge so heavy it required the sacrifice of all Darkin who would still listen. And for his failure to adhere, as penance for his refusal to appear before the ritual and end the Darkin War, Aatrox was now imprisoned within the very tool he used to perform his atrocities. As a result of this, all of the currently known Darkin are bound to their respective weapon, and will attempt to manipulate or manifest themselves within whoever holds said weapon. Aatrox was nothing more than a sword, lost on a battlefield for centuries. He waited and waited, surrounded by darkness, unable to breathe, unable to feel anything spare the cold abyss of emptiness, and always relishing the concept of what to Aatrox would be the sweet release of death. Bound in agonizing patience, he lay in wait until an unlucky soldier fleeing battle sought to wield the sword long lost on the battlefield afoot. Aatrox immediately consumed this soldier and proceeded to devour more victims and rebuild his form. After centuries, he was finally free, or so he thought. Aatrox searched the lands, scouring and harvesting more victims to rebuild his form, but found his flesh to be only a slightly larger cage than the sword he was imprisoned within. Realizing the full extent of his curse, he devoted himself to the broken ideal that now resides within every action he takes. For Aatrox, there is no other answer to his curse. In order to find his own end, everything else must meet theirs first. Aatrox walks a path of destruction in the hope that if everything else meets its end, so will he.
I know it was you, trickster! You gave them the tools to trap me! Come! Let me kill you! 1,000 times isn't enough!
Aatrox will begin seething in rage upon encountering Zoe, the current aspect of Twilight for Runeterra. What may be confusing to understand is that Zoe represents the aspect of Twilight, but she is not the actual individual responsible for sharing knowledge of how to seal away the Darkin within mortals. The aspects require hosts in order to properly conduct themselves. Currently, the aspect of war, Pantheon, has the host of Atreus. Misha, the predecessor, as the aspect of twilight to Zoe, gave the Runeterrans the knowledge to seal away the Darkin during the Great Darkin War. As a result of this, Aatrox and the other Darkin were bound into various weapons. Zoe, however, does not have any memory of this, being the new aspect of Twilight. Aatrox is also well aware of the cycle of aspects at this point, and knows that killing one may not mean removing the ability to find a new host or be reignited amongst the stars. As a result, he has chosen a very heavy-handed methodology to resolve this cycle. Aatrox will keep killing the aspects until there are no hosts left to adopt, until the concept of their existence itself is meaningless.
Aspect of change! Now you die!
His quest for oblivion serves to destroy all that would represent meaning. There does, however, lie an ironic chain of events that he has created within his quest to kill all living beings. Aatrox has unintentionally created two individuals who would now resist death itself. In his quest to end all life and find peace, he has done the very opposite and created stronger enemies that he must fight in the future should he wish to release his soul.
Yes, Tryndamere! I am the cause of your suffering. See if you can cut justice from me.
Bar in the Freljord stood Tryndamere, a warrior of the Freljord seething in rage at the loss of his tribe, their hubris of idolization resulting in the decimation of their village and the destruction of their mortality at the hands of Aatrox. On the cold tundra, a storm blew as the pale moon bore down upon Tryndamere's village. From the mists was seen a large figure with horns and blade. Aatrox had been mistaken by Tryndamere's people for the boar god that they praised, having fashioned their tribe's blades in the form of their god's ivory canines.
Primitives worship me, hoping for mercy. I shall give them death.
Those who knelt in praise were the first to die, and Aatrox mercilessly cut down all who would stand in his way. A vicious slaughter of the innocent, he proceeded to vanquish any living being within his reach as he moved through the village. Tryndamere roared, filled with rage as he charged towards Aatrox, only to be swatted away like a fly by Aatrox, left to die in the cold tundra of the Freljord. In that moment, Tryndamere found his sense of true rage, a true defiance in the embrace of death that allowed him to resist its icy grip and sustain himself to survive. Gathering the survivors of his village, Tryndamere traveled west to rumors of Averrosa's reincarnation and met Ash. Serving as her champion, Tryndamere lies in thought of how to pursue his personal vengeance against the Darkin Blade. The situation is somewhat ironic, as in attempting to bring oblivion to the tribe of Tryndamere, Aatrox's actions inspired a leader strong enough to lead the tribe and allow them to survive the Freljord. This, however, is not the only warrior created by the actions of Aatrox. A much stronger force would manifest itself in the form of an aspect.
Pantheon! I will crush your godhood! I will eviscerate your ideals! Even your memory, I will trample!
Aatrox is actually responsible for Atreus, the host of Pantheon, being able to gain control over the aspect of war and regain his agency over his body. This was completely unintentional on Aatrox's part, but it's nice to know even the quest for oblivion can have upsides. Atreus was born on the hostile slopes of Targon to the tribe of the Rakor. He is named after a star in the constellation of War known as the Pantheon. As he grew, Atreus joined the military of his tribe and ended up as one of the two surviving victims of a barbarian ambush. When Atreus was refused help by Leona in destroying the barbarians, he swore to capture the power of the aspects themselves by climbing to the peak of Mount Targon. Atreus was able to climb the peaks of Mount Targon, and as the skies opened, he was made host to a divine aspect with the power to take his revenge. But it was not Atreus who returned to Rakor afterward. Spear and shield gleaming with celestial might, it was the aspect of war itself, the Pantheon. Judging Atreus unworthy, a warrior who had known only defeat, it had taken control of his body to pursue its own ends, a task it considered too great for mortal men. Cast into the furthest corners of his own mind, Atreus endured only vague visions as the aspect scoured the world for Darkin, living weapons created in a bygone age. Not too far from Targon, Pantheon would encounter Aatrox, who sought the mountain's peak. Their fight raged into the skies, and they swept through the armies of men beneath, until the impossible occurred. The Darkin's god-killing blade was driven into Pantheon's chest, a blow that carved the constellation of war from the heavens. But as the aspect faded, Atreus, the man it had considered weak, awoke once more. Impaled upon Aatrox's blade, and with the power of the aspect's weapons dimming, he took a ragged breath and spat in the Darkin's face. Aatrox sneered and left Atreus to die. Atreus survived. After a lifetime of defeat, his will to live and his anger at betrayal were enough to stave off the death that had claimed war itself. He returned after months of recovery to find his sworn enemies under attack from Aatrox. Atreus's own will reignited the aspect's spear. Upon hearing the cries of the people around him, and with a mighty leap, he struck a blow that severed the Darkin sword arm. Both blade and Darkin fell to the ground. Only Atreus still stood, and watched his namesake's star blaze back to life in the heavens. Atreus vowed to stand against aspects, ascended, demons, and any who would wield power so great, for it can only destroy. Forsaking his own name, he has become a new Pantheon. Whether to the knowledge of Pantheon or not, the sealing ritual had been performed on Aatrox, and he now resides within the blade he once carried into battle. This is a bit of a mixed result for Aatrox. On one hand, he was imprisoned in his sword for centuries, and that obviously throws quite a wrench into the plans of world-ending, but on the other hand, while Pantheon may be an enemy of Aatrox, he does have a goal that works in the favor of Aatrox. They share common enemies because Aatrox is the enemy of, well, everything. So any enemy of yours is an enemy of Aatrox. Pantheon shares the goal of destroying the aspects with Aatrox, despite their opposite alignments. The aspects are not the only target for Aatrox. He also intends to destroy the spirit gods, which, as we're about to talk about, may not be in his best interests.
I kill God's priestess! Let us continue this fight until all things stop!
Aatrox was sealed while his human soul was merged with the celestial concept from his ascension. But now that the celestial concept has been forgotten, Aatrox is the avatar of a non-existent ideal. This is a state of imprisonment beyond that of mortality, and the endless curse of his existence is part of what drives Aatrox towards his quest for oblivion. There may, however, still be hope for freeing his soul and allowing Aatrox to finally lie at peace. A mystical power lies deep under the waves of Runeterra that may be the solution to Aatrox's curse. Bilgewater is home to the spirit god known as Nagakabouros, the deity of the Buru and an embodiment of the oceans and for motion throughout Runeterra. Often represented as a giant serpent, they possess the ability to test the soul itself. The test is one of strength, and those who prove their strength will be allowed to live on. Those who fall or falter will be absorbed and killed by the spirit god Nagakabouros herself. With this test of the spirit, it could be possible to release Aatrox from his curse and put him to rest. Illaoi, a representative of Nagakabouros, is able to channel this power, so it is possible an interaction between Nagakabouros and Aatrox could happen, but I'll start by saying Riot confirmed that Nagakabouros could free Aatrox, but they also stated that it's not that simple because the celestial concept he represents no longer exists. The problem lies with the merged soul of Aatrox. As mentioned earlier, Aatrox is not just a human soul, they are merged with the long-forgotten celestial concept. To die, the concept would need to exist in the first place, and the question of freeing Aatrox isn't something that can be answered in confidence right now.
In time, I will learn how to kill even your god Illaoi.
Aatrox does not seem aware or intent on taking this as an option, and even if Aatrox is tested by Nagakabouros, it's not guaranteed that he fails the test. Aatrox has the power to kill spirit gods and avatars. His mind is broken, and he is surrounded in rage and hate. With the way he acts, it's hard to think of a situation where Aatrox finds how to free himself, because he's not looking for help or answers. In his mind, Aatrox has finally found the solution to his endless suffering, and every step he marches towards oblivion, he does so with the belief it will bring him release. It's difficult to try and say how their interaction would turn out. I don't like to over-speculate, so all I can really say, surrounding the idea of Aatrox receiving freedom through Nagakabouros, is that it's not impossible, but I'm unaware of how the scenario would happen right now. Born in Shurima, Aatrox was ascended by the Sun Disk in his final days of life, and was renowned as a courageous and noble god warrior. At the height of his life, he stood as an avatar for a concept that is no longer known across Runeterra. But as time passed, Aatrox would fall. On the battlefields of Icathia, the Void was unleashed, inciting years of traumatic combat against the manifestations of the Void. Aatrox fought through this and survived with his fellow Ascended. Now calling themselves the Sunborn, they returned to Shurima to find desolation. Enraged at the betrayal of their emperor by Xerath, the Sunborn tried to hunt Xerath, and in doing so, burned the city of Nevermore and its people to ashes. Now broken by their encounters with the Void, and enraged by the loss of all they stood for, the Sunborn fought the only things left, themselves. And so they fell, known now by mortals not as the Sunborn of Shurima, but as the Darkin, a threat to Runeterra itself. Many years passed as the infighting continued, and during this time Misha, the aspect of Twilight, intervened. Through the acts of Tryndamere, many of the Darkin converged for a meeting. Using the Chalakar, the weapon of the Darkin's now dead leader, Tryndamere enacted the ritual that killed and reversed the ascension of the Darkin. Taken from the body of Tryndamere, his heart was used to refine the magic that would let mortals seal the fallen Sunborn into weapons. Easily brought to battle, Aatrox was defeated by the reborn Pantheon and cursed to live an existence trapped inside his sword. Left to lie there for centuries, Aatrox rose once more when a fleeing soldier attempted to wield the cursed blade. Aatrox sees no way to end his curse. Broken by the wars he has fought and bound eternally to the weapon he wields, Aatrox seeks to bring oblivion to Runeterra in the hope it will end his own existence. Entitled now with the name World Ender, Aatrox has lived a long and complicated life that ultimately left him dishonored and broken by the world he sought to serve. Aatrox's story is one of sacrifice unrewarded, a warrior who served so well in life that they were ascended and given the opportunity to continue, an individual who embodied a celestial ideal only to have it erased from reality. A walking imitation of the avatar once praised, Aatrox has fallen from such heights that part of his rage and anger are at what he has become. Disgraced by the monster he now is, he seeks to destroy everything, even himself. There is so much depth to this character that I didn't expect to find when I originally started making this video. I was surprised with how much lore there is surrounding Aatrox, and the script ended up being, well, a lot longer than I expected it to be. With that said, it's been well worth it to go through all his lore in order to finally understand just a bit more about the Darkin Blade.
So, I'm Aatrox. I'm a transcendental being trapped inside cutlery. What's your deal?
So there we have it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the thumbs up button and consider subscribing if you're interested in the content. I stream occasionally on Twitch, and you can find my links down below. Take care. Okay, no. I am 100% certain that Bell means water, or dock, or bay, or beach, or water bay thingy. Okay. Bel Zun is the name of a coastal outpost in Shurima, and Belveth was the name of the coastal city in Shurima. So Bel should mean coastal or water or something like that? Where would I even put this in a video?